you know, as we're going along. So thank you for sharing your lunchtime with us if you're on Pacific time. If you're not, just thank you for sharing your time. Um, our monthly installment for May is this lunchtime seminar. We're not having our normal, 5:30 to 7 o'clock event. So today we were lucky to have Allie Cox. Am I saying it right, Allie, or is it Ailey?
No, it's Allie.
Allie, okay. And she's going to go over today with us business data analytics, why it's not technical, and why it's important, and why we need it. Allie has spoken in the past for us and has done an excellent job with that. She's highly qualified, MBA, CBAP, and a lot of other certifications. So I'll leave it to you, Allie, when you introduce yourself, if you want to go over that. She's got years and years of experience. And I believe, from seeing what I'm seeing here, that you're an expert at B2T training in business analysis and agile, and a general manager there, but I'm sure you do a lot more.
Yeah, that's changed, but that's okay.
Including habla español
Sí,
fluently.
es verdad.
So thank you for joining us. And I just want to thank my board. I know some of the board members are here, but especially Steve. I know Steve puts a lot of effort into getting these events, getting our speakers, getting the events planned, organized, and communicated. So thank you for that. You didn't come here to hear me speak, so at this point, I'm going to turn it over to Allie to go over our topic for today.
Great.
Thank you.
Thank you. Hi all. So thanks for joining me. I guess my my I have my own business, but I've done a lot of work for a couple of training companies, and I'm not the general manager of NetMind anymore. I've actually gone back to we've gone back to what the company called B2T Training. I don't know if anybody's familiar with B2T, but they were at was anybody at the I wasn't there, so I'm drawing a blank. The BA conference in Orlando. Anybody get to go to that? Well, okay. I guess B2T had a pretty nice presence there, so that's good. All right, so I'm going to get started. I'm trying to share my screen, is why I'm fumbling a little bit. Let's see. Okay, I don't want to show you that. I want to show you the actual presentation, I guess. I may have to do this old school and just, there we go. What are y'all seeing? Are you seeing are you seeing the PowerPoint?
Just the first page.
Okay, and but it's the nice, you don't see the slides and everything, right? You're just seeing the front slide.
Yes.
I don't think it's presentation mode though. I see the next slide.
It's in notes mode.
In the notes picture.
Okay.
It's in notes mode.
Okay. Let's try this. I don't use Zoom as much as I do Teams anymore. There we go. That's better. Okay. So
there you go.
Yeah. So we're going to talk about business data analysis and how it relates to analytics, business data analytics. I don't know if y'all were on when I was talking to Diana. We're going to talk a little bit about the basic things you might need to know if you're looking to take the CBDA exam, Certified Business Data Analytics from the IIBA. I took it when it first came out several years ago. It was the first edition, and I hope they've changed it since then, because when I took it, it was during the pandemic, and you weren't allowed to take any notes or have a pencil even in your hand, and I had to do things like do standard deviation in my head. And whoever was proctoring me kept telling me, stop looking up. I guess they thought I had answers on the ceiling, but I don't know about y'all, but I look up when I think really hard. I have to kind of look up like this. So it was rough. I would love to hear if somebody goes through it their experience now, because I'm hoping they've changed it. But anyway, that's neither here nor there. So thank you all for joining me today. I'm not retired, despite popular belief. I'm trying to get there quickly, but not quite there yet. I am still working, and like Bob said, I have a lot of letters behind my name. But I really just want y'all to know that you're free to contact me if you have any questions about my book, The Business Analysis for Dummies, or anything around business analysis, data analysis, business agility. I'm glad to connect with you. Anyway, so let's get into what we're going to talk about today. So I'm going to talk about what is the difference between data analysis, and data analytics in the way that people use those terms. I really want to talk first, before I get into data analytics, I want to talk about my love for data, for business data, and the importance for good business data analysis and understanding data and the relationships between data. I've just seen so many projects go astray because nobody took the time from a business perspective to really understand the data. And look, talk a little bit about the risks of that and the things that I've seen in my career. And then we will get into data analytics, the roles within data analytics, what it has to do with the scientific method and the relationship between that, some of the basics that the IIBA says comes into play in data analytics, and I think are really good concepts to start to understand, and the practice domains that are within business data analytics. So that's what I plan to cover. Feel free to ask me questions at any time, but I think somebody's going to have to monitor the chat, because the way I have my screen, I'm not seeing the chat. So if somebody just shouts out questions, or if you put them in the chat, if somebody will let me know, that would be great. So anyway, so a lot of data, obviously, I mean, you're going to say, duh, Allie. We all know a lot of data is generated by business, and it's more and more every year, especially with AI coming into play. And the data obviously can be analyzed and mined using different techniques and tools. We want to understand the patterns within the data and generate some business insights and intelligence out of that data. So that's really the whole goal together, I think, of business data analysis and business data analytics. So we're going to talk a little bit about all of this. So what is data itself? The definition of data is defined. I'm just going to read it. It's a collection of unorganized facts or observations that can be processed to obtain valuable information. I think we all know that as well, that you can have mountains and mountains and tons of data, but unless you consolidate them, organize the data, visualize it well, it may not give you value, right? It may not turn into valuable information for a business. So that's really what we're driving for. So let's talk first about business data analysis. This is probably one of my most favorite subjects to talk about, to teach, to work with. People think I'm such a geek, but I get excited if somebody says, "Hey, Allie, can you help us build this data model?" Some people run away, and I'm like, "Yes, I can't wait." I love it. So what we need to understand about the data from the business perspective is, what data does our business use to run itself? So years ago, I think it was around maybe 2010, 2011, I was at one of the BA conferences attending a session. I don't know what the session was called. It doesn't matter. But the person who was speaking actually said, business analysts do not need to do data analysis. And I think my chin hit the floor at that point. To me, this is the most important skill or thing that a business analyst can do, is to really deeply understand the business data in the area you're supporting, or the project, the solution that you're trying to drive, and help the business understand its own data sometimes. It's amazing to me. I just got off of a 2.5 year consulting project with an insurance company, and it amazed me when I went from project to project, helping certain projects out. And I was working kind of most of the time on a claims, they were re-engineering a claim system. It was just amazing to me sometimes how people working within an area didn't really understand their data, because they say, oh, the system takes care of that. They didn't really understand how data was calculated sometimes, or why certain data was there, or even what data they needed in some cases. And so to dig into that data and help the business understand itself is really crucial. And what do we need to know about it? We need to know, like, what data do they need for their processes to run correctly? What data do they need to be reported on so that they can make better decisions? And so what I usually talk about is we need to understand what entities and attributes we're working with here. So this might be really elemental to you guys, but I'm going to go through it pretty quickly. So I always like to start at the attributes, even though it's at the bottom of this page. So what detailed pieces of data do we need to understand to help the business? I've got some examples here, like email address, policy number, the capacity of a plane, and how does that data relate together? We'll need to understand. First, we want to understand, okay, what are those major groupings of data that the business needs? Because that can help, especially if we're working with solutions that use IT, which are almost all solutions now. We need to start to understand, how is that data grouped? So for example, customer email address or customer first name, last name, that's probably grouped into a customer, what we call an entity. It could be a person, a thing, a concept. But understanding the attributes and entities can also help us help the more technical team, maybe a data architect, a database engineer, even a developer. Some of the teams I worked on lately, the developers were responsible for building out databases. It can help them understand what their tables and columns within those tables should look like. So not that we're doing their job for them, and we don't have to understand all the technicalities of architecting a database, but the better we can help those architects understand the data along with the business, the better they will architect that data to better serve the business. I mean, it just all flows together really nicely. So this is where I've seen so many times where the business says, oh, data, that's technical. The database people know what all that is. And the database people, well, they may know data, but they don't necessarily understand the business data. And so they may architect the database so that it doesn't serve the business well. Over and over, not so much now, but back in maybe in the 80s and 90s, I can't think of how many times that I came into a project or into a business area where people had to dump out all of their data from the database from their system and pull it into something else because it didn't make sense in the database where it was. That tells you that something's wrong in that data if it's been architected so that you have to dump it out and pull it into Microsoft Access or something to get reports out. So I've seen that many times. So really understanding what are those data elements and how is that data grouped is important, and to get definitions of that data. What does it mean to the business? Really important. And so the other things that we need to know, also called the metadata. So a definition of an attribute would be a piece of metadata. Other things that we need to know, is the data unique for this insurance company? Is the policy number unique? Well, sure it is, but then we ran into cases where they had accidentally reused policy numbers. What could that do? An insurance company, that's pretty serious. But if you think about it, if you've got a patient number for maybe a pharmacist, what if the patient number isn't unique? You could end up giving the wrong medication to a patient. You could give their medication to another patient. So it can be very serious not to understand what data needs to be unique. We need to understand where it's mandatory, where it's optional. You know, how many times have you guys seen where you look at a phone number within a database and it's all nines? It's probably not a legitimate phone number. What happened there? Probably somebody made that phone number mandatory in a system when they didn't always have a phone number to put in. So what do you put in? What do you enter if something's mandatory, but you don't know that data? You put in dirty data, garbage data, right? Or if you make something not mandatory that should be mandatory, what can happen? Well, either you've got missing data or dirty data, and neither one of those are good situations. So from the business perspective, we have to understand this stuff so that the data is getting captured the way it should be captured and that it's meaningful to that business. So other things we need to know, like, are there certain range of values that data needs to fit into? Okay. So a lot of bad things can happen if we don't get these business rules around that data correct, which is really what these things are, business rules. Help that business understand its own data. And until you start asking these questions, or unless you start asking these questions, sometimes they don't get asked. And then the data architect just maybe guesses, oh yeah, employee ID, well, it sounds like it's unique. Is it? Is an email unique? You know, they may think yes, but in certain situations it shouldn't be. So really good questions to ask. The other thing that I really think is maybe even more important is understanding the business rules between data. So these are often called relationships. And so if you look at my little example here, I've got a customer places one-to-many orders. And if you don't know entity relationship diagram symbols, that's okay. We're not going to go into that today. But basically the relationship between these two entities, customer and order, is a customer places one-to-many orders. So that's actually a business rule, because what it's telling you is that a customer must have placed an order in order to be a customer. What if you get that wrong? Well, let's say that the developer said, okay, a customer has to have placed an order. Well, then if you get a customer that hasn't placed any orders before, do they have to place an order before they can be registered as a customer? You could have these solutions that have the relationships between that data are messed up. So you end up not being able to get the data in that you need at the right time. So again, you either have missing data or possibly dirty data. Okay. So the entity relationship diagram, like I said, we're not going to go into the details of it because that's a whole nother long conversation. But this is a picture of the relationships between the data. And those relationships are business rules. So it's really important to at least understand those relationships, even if you don't draw a diagram. I love the diagram, but you don't have to draw it. But these are business rules here. Another one going back from order to customer. An order belongs to one and only one customer. Is that true? If that's what my business needs, then that is true. Like on Amazon, an order only belongs to the person who ordered it, who placed the order. You could ship it to many different places. So that's a whole nother relationship. But the order belongs to the person that has the account. So those rules are important to understand, or once again, you won't be able to get the data in that you want. And I have a question mark here between customer and product, because what I love about the entity relationship diagram, which actually is, at least when I took it, was part of the CBDA exam. You had to understand how to build out at least a little relation ERD. What I like about it is it makes me start to question, what other relationships do we have? And it really gets you into that deep understanding of what do we need now and what possibly might we need in the future. So a relationship between a customer and a product, well, you could say, well, customers order products. Well, I have that relationship here with the order. But what other relationships might we want to track between a customer and a product that is not through an order? If you think about Amazon, and feel free to shout out here if you want to come off mute, what things do they track about you and a product that's not through the things, necessarily through the things that you order? Anybody have an idea on that?
Tracking
I'll
what
ask,
you have
ask the
looked
question
at.
again.
Yeah. Well, first Travis, and then I'll ask the question again.
I was going to say tracking what you've looked at, not
Yes.
necessarily what you've ordered.
Yeah. So the question was, what does Amazon track about you that's not necessarily products that you've ordered? What products have you looked at? You know they're tracking that. So they're tracking what you click on. It may be tracking your wish list. That's another thing that, oh, well, you haven't ordered it yet, but it's on your wish list. So there's another relationship between customer and product that you would have. Products that you've reviewed, they track that as well. And then there's an interesting relationship from product to product where, hey, if you like this product, then, or if you bought this product, you might also like this other product. So they have a relationship somehow between their own products where they track, well, people that like this also like that, or people that bought this also bought that. So you might. So there's a lot of deep, there's a deep dive that you can go into with this data, and taking on projects. Usually I don't show people in my projects this diagram, or if I do, I take the symbols off because they think it looks really technical, but it's not. And if you just walk through these relationships with people working on your solutions, it can bring a lot of deep insights into, oh, we don't track this data now, but maybe we should. So we also have, as business analysts, we also need to determine what documentation do we need to build around the business data. At a minimum, I recommend to everybody you have some kind of glossary, definitions of the data that either your solution that you're working on needs, the business area. The most beautiful thing is if the organization as a whole has a glossary and everybody uses the same terms. I know that's kind of pie in the sky, but it's really beautiful when it happens that way. A glossary or a data dictionary, typically a data dictionary has a little bit more information about like that metadata that I talked about earlier, like where is the data unique? Is it mandatory? It might also have references to the different databases that data can be found in. A data model includes all of these things that I just talked about. What are our entities? What are our attributes? So what is that data that we're working with, the relationships? It will often have that entity relationship diagram that I just showed. That all is part of the data model and is very valuable. Data maps and extract, transform, and load, also called ETL information. So if you've got system to system mapping or maps to APIs, or you're going to be like the project I was on, they re-engineered an old claims processing system into a new, and they built out a new database with a new structure that was much more business aware. So all of those things might be part of the documentation that you build. And if anybody needs templates, or even I have sample documentation around this stuff, feel free to email me. I'm glad to share that with you. Templates, I love templates. They can really help. So that's really just an overview of some of the things that I think are really important for a business analyst to help out with when you're on a project or you're coming out with solutions, you're trying to deliver value. One of the most important things you can do, like I said, is to really understand the business data. If you understand you have a deep understanding of the business data, you will understand the business. Processes are easy once you understand the data. And So I think it's a really valuable tool. You can probably tell. So let's talk about business data analytics, also called BDA, and you'll see it referred as BDA throughout this presentation anyway. So business data analytics, to me, it helps remove personal biases and influences from the decision-making process within a business or an organization. So, and if performed well, you all probably already know this, it can really create an advantage for an organization. So for example, I think one of the coolest examples of this that I saw is that there are algorithms out there based on weather, soil, growing season, and other conditions for predicting the price and quality of red wine after it's been aged. And it was compared, those algorithms and calculations were compared to what the wine experts, how they made their decisions based on their own cognitive ideas and biases as to what they enjoy and don't enjoy. And it turned out that the algorithms based on the weather, soil, other conditions, much better predicted how a wine was going to sell and what price it could be sold for. So as wine experts, as good as they are at tasting all that stuff I can't taste in red wine, the oak and the pepper, whatever the fruit, the data analytics actually did a better job at it. So I thought that was pretty interesting. So the official definition from the IIBA of data analytics, you can see here, it's a specific set of techniques, competencies, and practices helping us to explore, investigate, and visualize business data. And so the goal of data analytics is to, like I said, is to gain insights around a business to make better decisions. So basically, it's a science of examining the raw data and information in order to get insights out of it. So I think I just basically said this right here. We're trying to get to evidence-based decision-making instead of the gut feel that has assumptions, biases, personal experiences involved. So we're trying to take that out of decision-making as much as we can. So the perspectives of data analytics, I'm going to go into each of these 5 perspectives that you see here. So let's just move ahead to that. So the first perspective that business data analytics is a movement. When an organization really embraces the evidence through data as a driver of business decisions and change, that's that movement. We're moving towards open innovation where customers actually are taking a leading role in the design of new offerings, what companies should be offering them, how they interact with solutions and applications. So we're really driving toward that. And the more that we use data to support the decisions that we make around product design and solutions, I think the more transparent we are, we're going to better understand market needs. We're going to better understand variabilities in our products or services or our processes. It'll help us improve in performance, and really helps us promote more sustainable processes and practices. So there's a movement. Business data analytics as a capability. So like I said, what we're really trying to drive toward is innovation, creation of a culture around data so that people lean on the data more for making decisions and for designing processes. So it's really a capability and fits right in. I mean, to me, I get confused sometimes between business data analytics and business data analysis, which they all kind of fold in together. But the better you understand the data itself that a business uses, the more you'll be able to get into analytics and help the business make better decisions. And those decisions actually lead to more robust data sometimes in the end as well, because you realize as you're making decisions and making better solutions, you can have more robustness of your data within those solutions. I hope I'm not talking in circles with that, but
Allie,
yes,
may I ask a question?
anytime.
So can you or speak to the reality of data begets data begets data? And so the scope of data capturing, you know, within business analysis and even project management, when you actually say, this is what we've got, and we're going to move it forward instead of continuing to get the data and then having it misinform and change the scale of a project. And going to speak to that, how we can put containers in the amount of data for specific marketing or business developments.
Yeah, I love that. So, like anything that we do, I think you have to prioritize. So, which is going to help. So, because people can say, oh, we want all the data. Well, there are a couple of problems in that you have to figure out how to get all that data, and then you have to figure out how to maintain it, make sure it's tested, make sure it's correct, right? And that what you're getting out of that data, the decisions that you're making out of that data are good decisions. So you have to kind of follow up on that and say, okay, did we make the right decision with that? But let me go back. You can't always get all the data that you want, or you could, but it's not always worth it. So we have to say, okay, if somebody asks us, oh, I want the eye color of everybody in the world. Why? So that, that's the number one question of a business analyst. It's like, why? What are you going to do with that data? And really understand that. And then if you've got a lot of data, I mean, I went through this with this project I was on. There were all kinds of things that they wanted to try to capture, but we had to prioritize some of it. We said, well, some of this we'll do in the future.
So
Right.
in my experience, it goes back to the hypothesis that's being tested or the 3 questions that are being answered. So I just wanted to.
Yes. Yeah. And I'm going to talk a little bit more of that, more about that. We have to understand, what are we trying to get to, make a hypothesis on it, and then go back and test that hypothesis. Right. So after the fact, you got to go back and say, okay, was that worth it? Was it worth capturing all of that? Are we using it correctly? Is it giving us the information that we need? And if it's not, do we pivot? Do we do something else? That's a great question, Diana. Did I answer it? Okay. Sometimes I'm not sure about that. So another perspective is that business data analytics is a data-centric activity set. What I mean by that is that it includes actions required for an organization to understand the problems that they're facing and figure out what problem they're trying to solve. Kind of like the question that Diana just had. What are we trying to solve for? Why do we need that? So the business data analytics really involves 6 core data-centric activities. It's accessing the data. So how are we going to access it? Who's going to access it? What's the security around it? Examining that data, so digging in and understanding that data, which we've talked about a little bit. Aggregating that data, because if you've got a huge data set, just looking at the data unaggregated often doesn't tell you anything. You have to aggregate it, total it, or sort it, filter it, those kinds of things. Analyze what we've come out with that aggregation, interpret it, and that, I think that's where that hypothesis comes in. Are we interpreting the data well? And then presenting out the results, which I wish we had time today to get into visualization of data. I really didn't do much of it in this presentation just because it's so massive. But thank you, Diana, also for reminding me a couple of books. I'm going to go ahead and show them so I don't forget. And I think they're in the bibliography of at the end of my presentation, which I assume will be available for you all. But Storytelling with Data is a great read by Cole Nussbaumer Knaflic. Wonderful woman, has a lot of stuff out there. This book also has an I didn't get it out of my bookshelf here, but it also has a workbook with it that's kind of, if you're into this like I am, it's actually fun to go through the exercises in the workbook. Another great book is Nathan Yau's Data Points. So these two books are really good around storytelling and data visualization that actually visualizations that actually tell a good story. And so all these data-centric activities lead into what we are familiar with already as business analysts, or we should be, where we are planning out what we're going to do around the data, analyzing strategy, understanding our stakeholders, designing good solutions, all with good analytics approach and analytics recommendations that might come out of those data-centric activities. So this all folds in really well with business analysis in general. I love talking about the different kinds of analytics that we can elicit and come up with in a business area, and how difficult it is to do the different levels of it. So you may have seen this before, but the four different categories of analytics, data analytics, are, the first one is descriptive. That's usually fairly easy. If you have the data, it's fairly easy. These are your typical reports that most businesses have. What happened in the past? How many widgets did we sell last year? Who were the top salesmen? And what locations or regions did we sell the most to? So those are your typical reports that are valuable, but they're hindsight. They're all hindsight, right? Then we get into a little bit more difficult analysis into diagnosing why certain things happen. So if our sales dropped in our widgets last year, does the data helping us understand why, right? Was there some kind of economic event or natural disaster or pandemic that caused a dip in sales? Why did that happen? And that can be very complex. Obviously, you get into some systems thinking in this area where it's not necessarily, one cause and effect. It can be very complex. Now we're getting into the area of insight, and it gets more difficult. Now we're trying to get into predictive analysis based on what happened in the past, perhaps, and what's going on, our diagnosis. What do we think will happen in the future? So we're trying to predict what will happen. That's why I have a little crystal ball that I drew here. It's sometimes you're guessing a little bit on that. And even harder than that is prescriptive analytics. How do we make happen what we want to happen? Can we use data to do that? So that is the most difficult and probably the place, obviously, where we err the most. So we're headed toward prescriptive in most cases. We're trying to help the business do better in whatever they're trying to do, more sales, or taking care of the earth better, or whatever their mission is. Okay. So these are the four areas of analytics for data, and we've got to be thinking, okay, what of these four are we striving to reach? What data is going to help us get there? The next perspective is probably really the goal of it is business data analytics is a decision-making paradigm. So it involves making business data analytics part of our informed decision-making across the organization. We're trying to get to evidence-based problem identification and problem solving. I think evidence from data is an enabler in business decision making that's more persuasive than instinctive decision making, right? We're not just going by gut feel. And to me, the collaborative decision making is huge. So we're not just looking at one perspective around data. And we're also trying to maybe combine that gut feel with analytics so that you say, okay, this is what the data is telling us. Does that seem right? Because you also probably can't just rely on data, right? You do have to have the gut feel in there sometimes, but you don't want the evidence to be totally contradicting your gut feel either. So it's kind of a balance in there, I guess. Okay. The 6 business data analytics domains out of the IIBA I show them here. And so I'm going to start kind of in the middle here. This is kind of a framework that helps in the successful execution of a data analytics initiative. So the first thing that we do is understand what questions do we need to ask? What is the research that we're trying to get to? Whatever that is. It could be defining an opportunity or a problem, which we will need to do, right? And it's really the task in this domain is like a good approach for solutioning. And I want to say kind of there as well. We're defining, and it will be very familiar to business analysts, defining an opportunity or problem, assessing your current state, ideating a future state, and planning your approach out. So that's part of identifying that research question. We got to figure out where to target that questioning. Then we got to understand, how do we source the data over here? Where does that data live? Does it live in multiple places? What is the source of truth? I've run into that a lot, where supposedly the same data is in different places in an organization and it doesn't all match. So where's that data? And if we do find gaps or inconsistencies, how do we fix that? How do we fill in the gaps? The third part of the framework is to analyze the data. So deciding how the analysis will be performed, what models and statistical techniques we'll be using, things like that. Then we need to interpret and report the results. This is where we need to think like designers and tell a story. So this is where that data storytelling is so crucial. And it can make all the difference in helping somebody make the right decision. So you got to think like a designer in this area, I think, with the right visuals. And that's like I said, that's a whole nother world that's very interesting, is data visualization. And then we want to use the results, again, to influence business decision making. So we're basically translating the analytics outcomes to business recommendations that stakeholders and other decision makers can consume. Okay. So I've talked about decision making a lot. And so, the data analytics can help us understand, what should we be offering as an organization? What should we be improving and making more efficient? Where should we be innovating? How do we manage and avoid risk if that's our goal? Where do we grow, and what other markets can we reach? So your data analytics should be impacting all of those kinds of decisions, or it can impact them. So how do we accomplish that effective use of analytics? The research questions are key. So doing that analysis around your analysis, basically, to me, what problem are we trying to solve, or what opportunity are we going after? What are our objectives? That's going to help you understand what questions to ask, just like anything that we do in business analysis. Really helping the organization manage the data, that's a tougher ask, I think, because then we do kind of maybe get into the technical aspects, but it's got to be a concerted effort between the business and the technical team, or you're going to end up with the things that I talked about earlier in the presentation, where the data is not architected to solve the business problems or to help the business go after opportunities. Understanding how data quality is managed is really important. That may be something that we help out with, whether it's running tests around data, or understanding how its quality is driven into the data before the data even gets captured and stored. We need to make sure that we understand how to best communicate. I talked about this. How do we visualize the results of the analytics, and really help people understand what they're looking at, without bias as much as possible. You can inject bias into almost anything in data. I think we all know that. And generating those good insights so that business decisions can be made well. So the roles within data analytics, a lot of people ask me about this. I think this is a little bit confusing. I get confused sometimes as well on the different roles and terms that you're hearing out there in the world. Officially, according to the IIBA, the data engineers are the ones that build out pipelines of data and help us get clean data, we hope. I was kind of disappointed that data architects weren't included in with this group. Maybe they've done that since I built out this webinar a couple of years ago. But to me, that a good data architect who is really interested in the business and not offended, or how do I put this nicely? They don't feel intimidated by a good business analyst who will go in there and ask good questions around data and help the data architect really architect the data well. We've got the decision makers, obviously. So they need to help us decide how deeply we want to invest in a data-driven opportunity for the organization. Our analysts, which hopefully it's us, that explore the data for insights and potential relationships that could be useful. Statisticians to help us make data-inspired decisions and use statistics to help us do that. I think applied machine learning engineers and AI engineers now I would add into this. So they're the ones building out these models for machine learning and artificial intelligence. And then the data scientists, who really should have mastery over not only analysis and statistics and machine learning and AI. I mean, they kind of are the masters of all of that. And typically will help lead a data analytics team. So you may have these roles or some of these roles in your organization. It's great if you do, especially a good data scientist is just key, I think. And what is the business analysis focus of business data analytics? I think I talked about this fairly extensively already, but to me, our focus is really on helping the organization make good decisions. I think Bob said it earlier, rather than on the technical side of analytics. So we're trying to figure out what business decision or hypothesis that we're trying to follow, and what should we dig into around that? What questions should we be asking? Always asking questions, and what insights can we pull from that business data? So the scientific method really fits well into all of this, where we're identifying the problem, we're researching the problem, creating that hypothesis. So maybe proposing a solution, or at least a best guess that we're going to run experiments on to test it out. And then presenting the conclusions that either support that hypothesis or tell us that we need to maybe start over. So that fits really well. And, you know, to me, we should be doing this not only around data, but around anything that we do. Like, do the what ifs. What if we do this? What results would come out of it? So that scientific method that I just talked about, combined with the business data analytics cycle, is a really good fit. So we're using that scientific method to analyze and draw conclusions out of what we're doing. Understanding, are we getting good data? We need to test out the data. A lot of times when scientists are testing out data, they have data that's collected as part of a controlled environment. And we don't usually have that luxury. We're just getting the business data. So you have to understand, is this data good? And if it's not, what do we need to do to troubleshoot it and correct it? So basically what I'm trying to get to with all of this is, as business analysts, we need to help the business have a shared understanding. And by shared understanding, I mean, we need to understand it. We need to help the business understand their own data. And we need to help, if we've got a technical team, we need to have the technical team understanding that business data and the relationships between the data, so that they can architect the best solution to store that data so that we can pull analytics out of it. So it's all like one big circle. We've got to understand the problem we're trying to solve and what decisions need to be made. What data do we need to make those good decisions? Get the right people or roles involved. Do we need a data scientist? Do we need data engineers or data architects? And it's really good to use that scientific method to determine what conclusions are needed to make good decisions. So, you know, some of the stuff I really didn't get into with this, but I think I saw that you all have Angela Witt coming in a couple of months to talk about AI, which she's wonderful. So that's really great. And some good storytelling. Like I said, I didn't put much of that in here. I just mentioned it, but that's another great topic. And the books that I showed are really good for if you want to learn more about storytelling, or you can come take one of our classes. We have some good classes, I think, on data analysis and data storytelling that could help you. Let's see, what else do I have here? Oh, so you all will see this in if you get the deck from either Bob or Steve. But feel free to contact me, direct message me on LinkedIn at Allie Orr Cox. I'm working some now. I'm not quite retired, but I'm still doing some training for B2T training. And we have some great classes around business analysis, data analysis, functional analysis, agility. So feel free to check us out. I also included some online references on all of this, some of the things that I used to help me study for and pass the CBDA exam. So some good books in there, including the couple that I showed. All right. I'm going to stop sharing. And I still didn't leave that much time for questions. I always do this. I always think I'm going to be done 15 minutes before I am. I'm sorry. What questions do y'all have?
Allie, I just wanted to share a few thoughts as you're going through that. And thank you. There's a tremendous amount of information in your slides. They're great slides. As you said, Steve is going to post them out to the Sacramento Valley Chapter IIBA website. So you can go there to find, you know, these slides, and I believe they're recording, right, Steve? Did we record this one?
Yes.
Yeah, so that'll be all posted out there. We have a YouTube channel with all of our recordings and a listing of really all of our past presentations that we could actually post. So there's a wealth of information out there. But one of the thoughts I had with AI is still evolving and everything. But in all of this, don't forget to use the most important tool you have, your brain.
Yeah.
So sometimes you can get so caught up in this data that you get, and you believe that it's accurate, right? Because it's data, right? It wouldn't lie. But you have to make sure that the data that you're seeing makes sense, right? And a computer, sometimes maybe AI will do it down the road, but can't tell you if it makes sense or not. An example, recently here at work, we had to provide some information to our regulators, and we pulled the data from one source and gave it to them. Then they asked for some more details, and the details came from data from another source, and the totals didn't agree. And it's because the second source that was used was old.
Yeah.
So if we just took it at face value, we'd say, oh, what happened? We have discrepancies, and we wouldn't be able to explain it. So you really have to be able to understand what you're doing with the data so that it isn't misused. So that's just my little addition to to all this is, and Diana's in our Babok study group class, so she heard me say this before, but there's that old saying, statistics don't lie, but liars use statistics. So again, you have to use your most important tool you have, which is your brain, when you're looking at all these data points, to make sure that it's consistent with maybe what you thought it would be. And the other thing is, a lot of people, old school, sometimes they just say, well, my gut tells me this. If you're able to grab the correct data, you could help that person make a really informed decision, not just a gut decision, because sometimes those gut decisions aren't always right. And sometimes the gut decisions go against what the data proves, and you have to kind of look into that to see, why is this person, thinking that maybe the data isn't accurate. So it's a fun little world to play in. But thank you again, Ali. Does anyone else have any other questions?
Bob?
Larry?
Yeah, Larry from Bay Area. Ali, I know we don't have time for this, but and we had some discussion last night. I was at a happy hour PMI event, and the specifics of AI and data analytics is already becoming huge.
Oh, yeah.
Unstructured data, the learning aspect of it. Can you speak briefly to that?
Not really. I'll be honest. I'm digging into that. I do not want to come across as an expert. I think that, we have to figure out, where is this going? How is it affecting the organizations that still have structured data, and that's what they go off of? And what do you do with that? The unstructured data still has to be structured at some point, or it's not going to make sense, right?
Right.
And so it still goes back to, are they pulling in, whoever they is in AI, are they pulling in the correct data that they're structuring to give us information on? And so I think there's still going to have to be, I may be wrong, but there's still going to have to be human intervention and people actually going back behind and saying, okay, is this actually correct? I think what it really speaks to is the complexity theory, which it's going to get more and more complex. And we just have to figure out, how do we dig through that complexity and come out with actual true insights, right? So that's about all I have to say on that. I hate to say.
Thank you.
Probably
So
wasn't very informative.
we're at time, but Ali, if you could hang around, if people still have some questions, maybe we can get to that. Steve, I know you wanted to wrap some things up with maybe talking about the raffle and the book. I think there was something there about a book that we're going to raffle off too, right? Or is that an old one?
I think that was an old one.
Okay.
Yeah, but there is going to be, I had 2 raffle prizes, and I'm going to do that offline after this meeting, and I'll just notify everybody of the winners when I send out a recap of all this, and the link to the presentation and the slide deck as well, and a survey too. That'll come out later today.
Excellent. Thank you. And you know, it's past time, so if people have to drop, that's fine. Ally, do you have like 5 more minutes maybe to hang around in case there's
Yeah,
extra questions?
Yeah. I just,
Okay.
if Joke or Joe, I'm not sure how to pronounce that, if he wanted the templates mentioned, how can I get that to your, I mean, anybody can email me. I'm glad to send them, but
If you have templates that you could share, you know, that you don't feel they're like personal, you know,
they're from
coin that you
BDT.
have.
Yeah,
Yeah.
no, but they're not copyrighted. We love to share them. I mean, you could go to the BDT website and download them, but I'm glad to just directly share them. And then
Yeah,
most of them I've built over the years for BDT or one of the companies that we were called. So
it would be great. It might be in your slide deck, but if you could put the B2T URL in the chat, that would be good.
Yep.
And any templates that you do want to share, you could pass them along to Steve and we could post them out with the presentation.
yeah. Yeah. And like I said, if anybody, I have tons of templates. Make sure I can't talk and write. So yeah, I spelled that right. I have a ton of templates around business analysis. So if anybody think, oh, I wish I had a template for that, just email me. I probably do.
Excellent.
You can probably tell I don't have a great memory. So I need any job aids or templates still, checklists that I use to make sure I've done my due diligence.
Sure. Anyone else? Any other questions for our expert while we have her here? If not, then thank you, Ally. Steve, we'll have a gift card that we're going to give you for your time. And it doesn't go far enough for all that you shared today and, you know, all that you presented and prepared for.
You don't
But
have to do that, but thank you.
it'll be something small. And thank you all for sharing your lunch hour with us too.
Yes, thank you all.
All right. Have a good day, everybody.
Thank you, Al, again.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you, Ally. Thank you.
See you.